But I went as a delegate with this, it's also a progressive group, but really what they do, they have a little benign name called the Applied Research Center, implying that it's a think tank, and it's not. It's a very progressive group. But and the minute I got off the airplane, my eyes were ripped open. I saw things in South Africa that I never saw before in my life. I saw abject poverty. I saw poverty in a way that I could just barely comprehend. I saw how workers not from our country are treated. I saw pictures of people who work for $3 a month, $2 a month, where they endure beatings, and if they don't clean an oven right, they get beaten, and the women are subject to rape by their bosses, and with no place to complain to. And also as a Indigenous person, I got to hang out with a whole bunch of other Indigenous people. I talked with the Aborigines. They were phenomenal. We went to visit a township, and one of the articles I read as I was reading up before we went to South Africa, one of the articles I read said, you know, all of these people that are going to this conference in South Africa, what they really should do is drive a few miles outside of Durban and visit a township, go to a school, talk to the people who are there. Instead, all these people are coming to Durban, they're going to stay in the fancy hotels, and they're going to eat well, and they're not going to know what's going on with everybody else. So we went to a school, we went to a township, and it was in that township that I was totally amazed about what I saw. The township we went to was a place called Umlazi, and there's 1 million people that live there, and people live in shacks with stuff, whatever they can find to put together to make their little houses, little one-room hovels, then that's where they stay. No running water, no electricity, no plumbing. We were talking to a group of, we talked to people, and at first everybody, including myself, was taking pictures of kids and taking pictures of these homes. And I remembered when I was a kid, and people came to my reservation and they were taking pictures of us. And I remember how uncomfortable that made me feel. And I was like, I'm doing the same thing that I hated people doing when I was a child. You know, people would drive through our reservation and call the police. They wanted to be escorted through the reservation, like, I don't know what they thought we were going to do. But they were afraid to drive through our reservation, but they come and they take pictures of us. And so I've been taking pictures of the little kids in the houses. When we talked to the people, the thing that jumped out at me is that they all want to come to America. They want to come to this great land of America. And when we tried to tell them we have poverty in America and we have racism in America, these young black men who were like 24, 25, you know, under 30, were just adamant, screaming at us, no, that there was no such thing in America as racism and poverty in America. And you know, we're not going to stand there and argue with them and, you know, wrestle them to the ground and say, yes, there is. We just, you know, my thing was, man, you come to America, you've got a surprise coming. And the other thing is I got to be on this panel because one of the things we do in Indian People's Action is address the issue of institutional racism within the system. Now, the first time anybody hears the word racism, the first thing they do is say, I am not a racist. Well, you know what? It's not about people being racist. It's about a system that is so old and so bad that it continually perpetuates the problems that we encounter year after year after year. So I'm talking about, you know, the welfare system. I'm talking about public education. I'm talking about law enforcement. So that's the type of stuff that we deal with in Indian interaction. So I was on this panel talking about racism in education in America. And, you know, y'all know the story, so I'm not going to rehash it, but one of the things that really stuck out for me on this, being on this panel, was there was myself, there was an Indian, there was a representative from South Africa right there, and a lady from, I believe, Brazil. And the other thing is, this was all, I've never had anybody translate what I say. And so, being the suspicious individual I am, I thought, I wonder if they're really saying what I'm saying, or if they're making stuff up. But, so, the thing that was very profound for me with this, being on this panel, was that if you were blindfolded, and if you did not know our individual voices, and if there were no accents, you could not tell the difference between the countries. So what goes on in America goes on in India, goes on in South Africa, goes on in Brazil. And the bottom line is that our kids are not getting the best education that our tax dollars, and believe it or not, as Indians we pay taxes, our tax dollars are going to that, and we're not getting the best for our dollar. That was the thing that struck me. The other thing that really struck me about my trip to South Africa was how very small my own little world was. Now, I had thought that I was very sophisticated. After all, I've been to New York City. After all, I've been up and down the steps of our great hallowed halls in Washington, D.C. I've even been to San Francisco. I thought I was very sophisticated when it came to the world and that I knew a lot. But you know what? I realized when I was in South Africa and talking to all the people that I talked to, that my own world was very, very, very small. And it was of my own doing. Because I didn't look, I didn't know anything before last August. I knew nothing of our foreign policy. I knew nothing of the policies that we have regarding commerce, regarding finances, regarding money that goes on in the other countries. All I know is that the people I saw there, they think that we are all very, very rich. It doesn't matter that we have poverty. They don't see it. They think that every single one of us are just rolling in money, and that we don't appreciate it. So since I've been back, and I haven't spoken as much, but I spoke to a lot of different groups when I first got back, one of the things that I realized that as myself, as an Indigenous person, and just as an aside, I no longer refer to myself as a Native American, even though it's so old hand, and I call myself an Indian, and then people scold me. Non-Indians scold me because I call myself an Indian because it's not politically correct. And what I say is, I've been an Indian my whole life. I've been calling myself an Indian my whole life, and I don't think it's so bad. And I'm not gonna. It's one of those things where you tell me not to do it, and what am I gonna do? I'm gonna do it. So there, because I'm very adult about the whole thing. This was the aside, our group talked with Indians. And the thing that struck me is that the Indians from India and the Indians from this country are two completely different races, two completely different cultures. So to imply that I just happen to be an Indian from America that's part of this culture is wrong. I'm not an American Indian. And how many of you were born in America? To me, y'all are Native Americans. Y'all were born here. I mean, I'm telling you a secret. I was born in California. Don't tell anybody from Montana, because they'll make me leave. So technically, I'm a Native Californian. So y'all are Native Americans. I've taken the term Indigenous to be called an Indigenous person. I call myself an Indian. I'm not going to quibble over what you call me as long as you do it with respect. But I think that we as Indian people need to look outside the box. We need to look outside things and realize what's going on outside our sovereign nation borders, outside our state borders, outside our U.S. borders, because there's a lot going on there that I didn't know about. And you know, what's happened to me being in South Africa now is that it's like trying to unring the bell. And I keep in touch with a number of people that I met there, you know, thank heaven for email. But I just think that all of us really need to figure out what's going on out there. What are the policies that dictate what those people think of us? Because what I found out there is that a lot of things are being done in the name of America that I know nothing about. A lot of really bad things. Good things too, it's not all bad. But a lot of really bad things are happening in the name of America. And so when you and I travel outside these borders and we go to these other countries, what we're doing is bringing along all that baggage. And we get accused for it. So it has been a life-changing experience. I would not change it for the world. I'll just close with one little thing and turn it over here. But we were coming back. It was, I believe, a 14-hour trip over. And we're coming back. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and everybody's asleep. The lights are low on the airplane. Little candlelight, little ambiance. And the captain comes on. The other thing I noticed as another aside is how polite people are and how rude our folks were at the Atlanta Hartsfield Airport when we cleared customs. And I was totally amazed at the rudeness of our own folks. At any rate, so we're cruising along over the Atlantic Ocean. We got a group rate, so we flew from Durban to Johannesburg to another big town. So we're heading to Fort Lauderdale, and then we go on to Atlanta. So we're cruising along, 3 o'clock in the morning, everybody's asleep, and the pilot comes on and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?" I reached over to our state board chair for Indian People's Action, and I said, Francine, wake up, he's saying something like a tone of voice. And she's got a blanket over her head, and, you know, she looks at me with one eye, and she's like, "What's the matter with you? Listen." And so he says, "I have good news, and I have bad news. The bad news is we've been battling 100-knot winds all night. Although we do feel we could make our destination, we've used far more fuel than we anticipated. We're low on fuel, and maybe we won't be able to make it to our destination." I'm like, "Oh God." And so he says, "And the good news is I've secured clearance for us in Barbados, and we can refuel there and then continue on." And by then we've been on the plane like 10, 11 hours, 12 hours, I don't know. No, we got on at 10:30 at noon. So it's like 3 o'clock in the morning coming back in time. And then he doesn't tell us how far away Barbados is. So then he says, "I'm going to try to let you walk around. I realize you've all been on the plane a very long time and you're tired." And he said, I'm going to see if they'll let you off in the airport. So while we refuel, he said, "But if they refuse, please don't be grouchy." And I was like, "Oh, okay, sure." And he said, "To keep your mind off things, I've instructed the flight attendants to serve breakfast." And I'm like, "Breakfast? I want an omelet? Where's my flotation device? How far away are we? Why didn't I pay attention to her when she's doing this?" So, anyway, we did get there. So technically, I have been to Barbados. Never got off the plane, but I've been there. And then we came home, and I will say that South Africa changed my life in very, very many ways. It's one of the most beautiful countries I've ever seen. I saw things I never saw before. I heard things I never heard before. I ate things I never ate before. And I learned things that I never knew before. And like I said, I can't unring the bell, and so I encourage all of us to be totally aware of what goes on outside our borders, because there's a lot of stuff going on that we don't know about. Thanks.
A couple of things. I want to thank Rick and Nan for asking me to speak. They're good friends of mine. And also that we represent Caring for Creation, and that is a spiritual connection to nature. And so we're all into globalization and caring about the earth, but we do it from a spiritual perspective. I'm not going to get too heavily spiritual on you, but I am going to talk some to that. Because I feel that basically that is the approach of Indigenous people, a spiritual approach to the earth. By the way, my name is spelled Louisa Dupuis. It is not that the way it is and that's important to me because that was my grandmother's name. I speak to you today in honor of my great-grandmother, Louisa Dupuis, who was a Assiniboine, Cree, and French-Canadian. I speak to you in honor of my European ancestors as well. And I want to include, since we have a number of Asian people here, that I have 3 half-Asian grandchildren. My family believes in all races. We are here today to talk about human rights and the rights of Indigenous people in particular. Behind this discussion, we have an even more important task. We are here to envision a new world. We are here to imagine and thus create a just, sustainable, and equitable global community. And we are ready to take action. We want our children and our grandchildren and their grandchildren to enjoy clean air, clean water, good food, and plenty of it. And we want them to have adequate shelter from the elements. These are basic rights, basic needs. We have higher needs as well, higher rights, which are cultural and spiritual. And we humans are not the only people with rights. We have animals with rights as well. And the earth herself has rights. Imagine, if you will, a huge circle, a huge globe or sphere. You may wish to picture the blue earth of the astronaut that the astronauts saw from space, the round blue planet floating in the ether. Or you may wish to see this circle as a medicine wheel on top of the mountain like the one we have in the Bighorns in Wyoming. Some of you have been there. Or you may imagine Stonehenge in England. The circle is a worldwide symbol, a universal symbol of harmony and balance throughout the earth. Now walk the perimeters of this round sphere, and when you get to the east, enter with me. Go to the center. See yourself standing there in the middle of the circle. Now walk out the 4 directions with me, going first to the south, then back to the center. Now go to the west and back to the center. Now go to the north and back to the center. You came in from the east. We have created a cross inside of the circle. We have created a sacred wheel. For now, let this circle represent the earth and all its people. The north is represented by the color white, signifying the Caucasian people. The east is represented by the color yellow, signifying the Asian people. The south is represented by the color red, representing Indian people. To the west, we have the color black, or the African people. Now you have it. All the races of the world are contained in one continuous, unbroken circle. When you stand at the center of this symbolic circle, anywhere on earth, you will always know where you are. You can draw the energy from the four directions, and you can feel the earth, the mother of us all, beneath your feet. You can feel the sun, the Father, the energy giver, the impregnator above you. The symbolic symbol we have just spun is a metaphor. All life, all systems, all species are contained within the circle. All are interconnected, all are sacred, all are alive. This is basic indigenous thought. In a time when we are about to destroy ourselves by polluting our water, air, and soil, in a time when we're killing off thousands of other species yearly, in a time when we're punching a hole in the ozone and overpopulating the earth, we need this kind of thought. We need our indigenous people who have long called themselves the Earth Keepers. In contrast to this value system is the Western worldview, modernism. That's the all of you are an exception, which came about shortly after the Renaissance. And although modernism has provided the world with better physical conditions and has earned us many rights, including freedom of speech and religion and the right to own property, and by the way, these have been denied to Indian people, the modern industrial world has now become what I believe to be the central cause of our nearly disastrous international global eco-catastrophe. And I believe it is fair to state that the modern Western world perceives and treats indigenous people like it does the rest of nature, as commodities of no value in and of themselves, but simply as a means to an end, as things to be exploited for economic profit. According to native North American traditions, everything that the Creator made, whether animate or inanimate, has a spirit. Therefore, all things and all creatures are sacred. Relationships with other creatures, the Earth Mother, and humans are well defined. The Earth provides us with two-leggeds, or the people, and all the others who are put here by the Creator. And the people therefore have an obligation to respect and care for the earth. The four-leggeds, or animals, are willing to sacrifice themselves to feed and clothe the people. And as a result, the people must show respect for them, taking their lives only when necessary. The ancestors, those who reside in the land of the spirits, asked the advice, gave the life to the people who are now living, and the people who are living must ask the advice and respect the ancestors. Humans must also respect their living kin or human relatives. They must provide and care for each other in order to survive. As humans, we must care and provide for each other in order to survive. This then is a system of mutual respect. In contrast, the modern industrial worldview believes that all things, creatures, animals, plants, minerals, are placed on earth to serve mankind, or humankind. Other creatures are here to be exploited, to be utilized for human consumption. They're used to make a profit. Humans, but only certain elite humans, are placed here to dominate, control, and manipulate nature to serve their own purposes. Nothing is sacred. Only humans have soul or spirit. No one is responsible for anyone other than their own nuclear family. And all nuclear families are independent of all other nuclear families. Life is here to making a profit and obtaining material possessions, like those $500,000, $600,000 houses that are called mansion houses, heights up in our little town of Missoula. That kind of thing goes on. Life is geared to making a profit, as I said, and obtaining material possessions to gain wealth. The individual works 60-hour weeks, and my children are included in this number. To obtain these possessions and to establish a retirement, you work all your life for things and to get this retirement. Both married people, if you're married, put in these kinds of hours, at least 40 to 60 hours. It used to be that Indigenous people worked like 3.5. He or she is encouraged, controlled, influenced by the corporation and the government, which preaches the doctrine of upward mobility and unlimited economic growth. It is these very doctrines which lead to the destructions of thousands of species and inflicts genocide on Indigenous cultures worldwide to obtain non-renewable resources such as coal and oil that the corporation needs, or that we think we need to keep ourselves going. The corporation and the government makes slaves of its own people and makes slaves of us and of the Indigenous people who have survived by creating inordinate need through advertisement for its products. It's like you can't escape it. This complex system of materialism provides the good life, promises security, but it will eventually lead Western society to isolation, destruction of the earth, and to despair. The people have become robots to serve the machine. We are speeded up, aggressive, and no one has any time. We have become separated from the cycles of nature, the seasons, the passage of the sun and the moon across the sky. We no longer grow our own food, and it all comes from the grocery store, and many of us think that a chicken has 3 legs. Yet this is the system that our schools, the TV, and the government continues to support. If we want to change the disastrous direction we are headed ecologically, and we must do so or we will destroy ourselves, we must first change our worldview. And herein lies our hope. With a change in the way we perceive our place on earth, in the circle of life, we will continue to exist. need to look to the earth keepers, the indigenous people of our planet, who have maintained cultures for at least 10,000 years, and some say 40,000, some say 100,000, for answers, for the power and the relevance of their ancient knowledge. There is a third worldview, and you heard about it last night, and we all are recognizing it. I think there's probably 50 million of us now. We're all part of this new social paradigm. We all care. We're like Native people. We love the earth. It's made up of people like yourself, individuals who choose to get involved in the ecological crisis, who choose to live lightly and simply on earth. Not surprisingly, most of them believe the earth is sacred. I think it's 70% now in the U.S. The earth is sacred. You know, some of us believe she's a living organism like the Gaia theory. One more thing. Please consider the concept of diversity. Science has proven that no one species alone is a good idea because it leaves them vulnerable to disease and attack from foreign organisms. You know, like raising even a crop of trees that's all grows to the same level, same species, that kind of thing. It's subject to disease readily. And this concept applies to human cultures as well. Diversity in cultures leads to the health and well-being of the global community. Thank you.
Right now I've been part of a group called, it's a grassroots direct action group called Montana People's Action, and we fight on issues of basic social and economic justice, landlord-tenant, mobile home court rights. And in 1992, I don't know if y'all were still around and who was here, but I was here. Jesse Jackson, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, came to Missoula, and he came here to the university, and we had like 2,000 people turn out at this rally. And of those 2,000 people, I saw so many Indian people, and I was talking to them, and I thought, oh, they must have come in from Idaho and Washington, and you know, they're from up north. And it turns out that they all lived here in Missoula. And so from that was born the idea of Indian People's Action, of which I'm also the project director. So Indian People's Action is a group of those of us who are urbans. That means we no longer live on our reservations. Doesn't mean we don't maintain contact. I'm very traditional. I go home. I just hop in my little car and drive the 8 hours it takes to get there, and I'm home and I hang out with my family, and it's good it rejuvenates me. But what happened is that when we were talking about the rights of people, and I fight for the rights of people, the reason why I do this work is because when somebody looks at somebody else, and whether it's any of you or myself or anybody else or poor people, when somebody begins to discriminate against somebody else based on their skin color, their age, their weight, their money or lack thereof, their education, their disability, then I've got a problem with that. And so my work centers around fighting for the rights of people. And in Indian People's Action, one of the things that we found is that people had no idea that in the United States, these are not from the 2000 census, but with the 2.5 million indigenous people living in this country, 60% of us live in urban areas away from reservations. 12,000 Indian people, urban Indian people living in Seattle. 20,000 urban Indian people living in New York City. Nobody knew that. There are Indian people, urban Indian people living in just about every large city in the United States. And nobody understood that we had issues. Everybody assumed that our issues were water rights, hunting rights, fishing rights, sovereignty. And you know what? We care very deeply for that. I care very deeply about sovereignty and all of those issues. But what I also care very deeply about is the fact that people are being discriminated against. And so in my organization, that is what we fight. And I believe it's a calling. I made the decision to do this. I graduated from this very university. I don't think I was ever in this room though, but I spent many years here, walking back and forth, and I decided that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, because I know what it's like to be treated differently. Because I'm fat, because I'm old, because I'm tall, because I'm short, because I'm brown, because I'm whatever. And it's wrong. And so that's actually too what I brought back from South Africa, is not only do we have to fight for what goes on right here in our country, but we have to keep an eye about what's going on out there, because people are treated, if we think we're being treated poorly here, holy moly, are people treated a lot worse in countries. I was totally amazed by it. Okay, I'm getting back on my soapbox, so I'm going to get off.
Can I assume that you include gay and lesbian rights in your...
Everybody. I want to say, when we formed Indian Peoples Action, that we talked about, because I firmly believe that if, and the people who are part of Indian Peoples Action, anybody, and I'm sorry I left that out, so thank you for reminding me, anybody that is treated different because of their orientation, you know, their skin color, their weight, whatever, that's wrong. And we stand together, because you know what? If I don't stand up for you when you're being mistreated, how can I expect you to stand up for me when I'm being mistreated? One of the things for Indian Peoples Action, one of our big issues was the fact that our kids were being treated differently in the school system. Higher dropout rate, low test scores, and then in doing further research, we found out actually that low-income kids were being treated differently. So if you don't have as many nickels as somebody else does, you get treated differently. So one of the things being a direct action organization means that we don't sit around in a room and talk about it. We don't get around at a table and chat about it for the next 4 or 5 years. What we do is we get together and we lay out a work plan that means, you know, we're going to take on some direct action. We've done protests, like at the school board meetings. For a whole year, we went to every single school board meeting, because we were running what is called the QUEST program, which stands for Quality, Unity, Equity, Safety, and we had a hard time with the T word, so we came up with totality, which I have no idea what the heck that means, but it was on our campaign. And QUEST was really good. We have a quest for a fair and equitable education, not just for us, for every student in the system. So using direct action, we use protest, we use civil disobedience if we have to, and the decision is made by our members. Is that what you were asking? We also were instrumental in Indian Peoples Action in pushing for the passage of the 1999 Indian Education for All law, which covers kindergarten through the Board of Regents. So our goal is to change the policies that affect our membership, so that those policies actually improve the lives of our members.
You know, it took me a while to come up. I knew that I was being rather idealistic and philosophical, you know, say a forum that is to address solutions, and there didn't seem to be a way around that. You know, all of my reading, and I did bring some books if you would be interested in. I think I'm not the only one that's looking at a global picture and refashioning a worldview. And the point being that the worldview is what's important for you to change. And I think that's happening. You know, and of course my own process was to go back to my native roots. I thought I'd mention these books, and if you want to get a hold of some of them, probably the most important one that addresses the native rights is In the Absence of the Sacred, and that's gerrymander. And he talks about the Hopi and the Shoshone, and we were going to have a third speaker on the Shoshone. And what's interesting is, I think it was, let's see, I've got a date here. 1978, we established an Indian Religious Freedom Act, and this repealed laws that made the sweat and the sun dance felonies. You know, you're a tribal people trying to practice their spirituality in a country that has freedom of religion, and it isn't until 1978 that the Indian people, who are the people of the soil, and now we as Europeans are becoming people of the soil, or Asian or black. The thing is, they couldn't practice until very recently their own spirituality. So, you know, all these things go on. So what happens is this little act that you know, that they introduced that will repeal laws that make things happen was also set up so that people could appeal to get some of their lands back as well. I'm not sure if I got the date, maybe you can help me out on that one. It was in 1946, the Indian Claims Commission, and this was to help Native Americans possibly be justified for some of the land that was taken from them. Well, what's happening, which is just amazing, is like the Shoshone are refusing the monies that the U.S. government is trying to give them. So are the Sioux. They're refusing money for the Black Hills. And it's just amazing because, you know, what's going on is they've got it pretty well figured that the U.S. government, if they take the money, they sell the land. And they said, we never made a treaty with you to give this up in the first place. And these lands are ours. And we will not, the minute they sell it or take any money from it, you know, then that opens it more open to gas and oil or whatever, uranium, than, you know, like the Hopi are dealing with the uranium, you know. And it's just one atrocity after another. I think there was 380 treaties that, and you know, and that's just in the first, you know, few years of, you know, after we established a government in this country, that 380 treaties broken for the Indigenous people. I don't think there's ever been a treaty that has been kept. And when you talk about rights, that's saying no rights. You know, that's saying that these people, you know, Indian people, Indigenous people worldwide are simply a commodity to be pushed aside and walked over. And here they are with the basic information, the basic knowledge that we all need in order to, and I apologize for the word, save the earth. Indian people have the way of existing that is absolutely mandatory for us to study. I mean, I think that you know that. I'm not telling you anything new. I think it needs to be emphasized, though.
Yes?
Can you recommend any particular materials to study? That's a huge question. You know, like if something comes to your mind on the top of your list.
Would you repeat that? Oh, yes. Yes. These just on this issue, I told you, In the Absence of the Sacred. The other one is The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight, and that's Tom Hartman. Did you get gerrymander on that first one?
Yeah.
In the absence of the sacred, that's gerrymander. And I think it's 91, so there's a lot happened since then. Alaska's another place where there's a lot going on, and it's more recent, so you might want to follow. And he mentions it, but it's happening. The Last Hours of the Ancient Sunlight is Tom Hartman, and he wrote another book called The Prophet that I didn't really like. Someone else said, I was talking the other night, that did like it. But this one is another overview, discussive native view, plus corporations, and that we're fast running out of the ancient sunlight, which is, of course, the oil and coal, and it's proposing that probably we have 40 years left, and maybe what we want to do about it, that kind of thing. This book is probably the most outstanding book, I think. It's spiritual. It addresses the global problem, the big rip-off, as well as introduces the idea that we live in a global community and that we're all responsible. It's called The Great Work, Our Way into the Future, and it's Thomas Berry. And I think it's one of the very best books you can get at this particular time. What's the copyright on this one? Do you want to check that for me? The other book that... it's what? No, the copyright. I think that's real recent. I think it's 2000. Yeah? Okay, so that one's pretty recent, and I think this one is recent. Gerrymander is a little bit dated, but he's still, I haven't heard of a better one. Maybe if somebody had heard of one that's more up to date, they could let me know. The other book that I brought along is called The Cultural Creatives, and that is you. You are the cultural creatives. In other words, there is a couple of people here, a man and a woman. It's a real recent book. It's called Paul Ray and Sherry Ruth Anderson wrote it. And what they're doing is identifying the worldviews. And they're calling the movement that we're all involved with right now, they're identifying it. They say that the problem that we're having is we haven't identified ourselves. That there's like 50 million in the U.S. alone that are part of this movement that we're all involved in. And then, of course, there's, Europe is in a lot of ways, like Denmark and some of those countries are way ahead of us. And of course we have Canada, and so these people have done a study and taken a number of surveys on what it is that identifies you as a cultural paradigm. What your values are. For example, one of them was that the earth is sacred. It's like 70% believe the earth is sacred, and many of those believe the earth is alive. Like Indigenous people believe the earth is alive. The other thing with Indian people, I don't know of any Indian or Indigenous people, I'm using Indian, meaning Indigenous, that doesn't use the term Mother Earth. So it's very, very relative and very connected to Mother Earth. And as far as that goes, if you really want to get the spirituality, read Black Elk Speaks. Okay?